COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine have brought energy, inflation, food and security crises to the fore. As leaders across the globe are facing multiple crises that are happening at the same time and compounding each other. The impact is being felt across the globe with no country left unaffected. While leaders are dealing with the risks such as rising inflation and a possible recession, these crises are exacerbated by climate risks.
What we find is that when it comes to today, energy crisis at the very top, food crises, cost of living. 2 years out, though, the experts are still expecting that the cost of living is going to be the #1 risk on the global agenda. 10 years out, especially in the top 10, 6 of the top 10 global risks are dominated by climate and environmental related risks and risks that are associated with that. So for example, large-scale involuntary migration makes it into the top 10 as well, in fact the top 5 over the longer term.
Businesses have to take into account the various risks in their planning. Concerns include the rising cost of living and access to raw materials and various components. It's feared that the cost of living pressures and food insecurity could provoke civil unrest and instability.
Last year, for example, we saw the impact of rising fuel prices that led to protests and in a number of countries with strikes and political upheaval. So we have seen the impact already. And of course, businesses need to keep an eye on these political risk scenarios as well as the increased geopolitical tension in the world, because it creates complexity in terms of managing risks in supply chains. And the war in Ukraine has impacted access to raw materials and minerals, but it's also led to sanctions and trade restrictions that has had an impact on other goods and services as well.
The report calls for a better balance between national preparedness and global cooperation. It says while national risk preparedness can enhance the ability of societies and the economies to rebound from shocks, many global risks are most effectively tackled through coordinated global action. Meanwhile, South African respondents on the Executive Opinion Survey identified state collapse, debt crisis, collapse of services and public infrastructure, cost of living crisis, and employment and livelihood crisis as top 5 risks likely to pose the biggest threat to the country in the next 2 years. Gloria Sefako Mosi, SABC News, Johannesburg.